Hey everyone, Mr. Harvey here. Let's continue our lecture on Chapter 9, and we are talking about the Enlightenment. Now, today I want to focus on a couple different topics within the Enlightenment. I want to talk about the Enlightenment in the context of religion. I want to talk about the Enlightenment in the context of women, and then I also want to talk about the Enlightenment and economics. So let's start with religion, ladies and gentlemen. During this time, we are going to see philosophers attack religion. We are going to see philosophers, and many of these philosophers, very important for us to understand, ladies and gentlemen, many of these philosophers are religious. Many of them are Christian. We'll see some of the Jewish Enlightenment, but many of these philosophers believe in God. But they are going to be talking about numerous topics within religion, and one of these topics is they are going to be criticizing ecclesiastical, organized religious institutions. One of these major arguments that they're going to be, really going after is this idea that religious organizations were an impediment, were a barrier to human improvement. We're going to see philosophers criticize the privilege that ecclesiastical institutions had in countries. For example, the notion that the clergy in France, the first estate, did not pay any taxes. Philosophers are going to criticize that, and they're going to consider that, corruption. And that's, that kind of really harkens back to Wycliffe, Huss, Luther, Erasmus. That really reminds us of some of what we saw in the Northern Renaissance and in the Reformation. But philosophers are going to be attacking really the intellectual notion, the notion, and they're going to be making the argument that these churches hindered the pursuit of reason, that they hindered the study of humanity and nature, and that they had people focused on religion as opposed to reason. Okay. And some arguments that they're going to be attacking is the notion that organized religious institutions. And when I say organized religious institutions, it's not just the Catholic Church, but they're going to be going after Protestant churches as well. Anglicans, Lutherans, Calvinists. They're going to be going after Catholics and Protestants alike, and they're going to be going after these institutions for some of their teachings, such as the notion that humans were only worthy of divine grace, and the notion of original sin that taught that human nature on earth, the improvement of human nature, was impossible. So we're going to see many different arguments that these philosophers and many different conversations they're going to be having within the context of religion. One argument that they're going to be making is the notion that religion turned people's attention away from the present world to the future, heaven or hell, and that was distracting humans, that humans were not attuned to the present problems, and so therefore that they weren't totally focused on the natural world. And so we're going to see the philosophers challenge these ideologies from these religious institutions, attack some of their their status in countries, the notion that they still owed large amounts of land, the notions that they had a lot of influence in government, the notion that they had a lot of privilege in governments. So we're going to see many different attacks from the philosophers on these religious institutions, intellectually, politically, socially, morally. The philosophers are definitely going after religious institutions, Protestant and Catholic alike, ladies and gentlemen. Important. Let's talk a little about the concept of deism, ladies and gentlemen. This is very similar to the English approach to religion, and this was the belief, okay, and I'm going to say the word rational a lot, that there was a rational God, and that God is rational, and that this rational God created a rational universe, okay, with natural laws, all right, gravity, all right, and that God also created, so he created this natural universe, Earth included, all right. He created, rational humans to understand and to study that rational universe. So it's the notion that there's a rational God. He created a rational universe and rational humans, and he gave humans the gift of reason and rationality and science and empiricism and objectivity and intellectuality to understand that rational universe. Very influenced by the English approach to religion. Now, there's two main points for deism that I really want to acknowledge. Number one is the belief in the existence of God. Deists believe in God. And what we're really seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is the philosophers trying to reconcile religion and reason. What do I mean by that? Well, they're trying to meld them. They are trying to meld them. They believe in God, but they also believe in reason. So how can they come up with kind of a perspective that brings both perspectives together? Well, this is definitely deism, and a major part of deism is the belief in reason, but also the belief in God. They believe in God. Okay, and that's important for us to remember from our philosophers. They're going after religious institutions. They're going to be going after Christianity, but that doesn't mean they don't believe in God. Some of them don't. We'll see atheism, but many of them do. And another main point of deism, ladies and gentlemen, is the notion that that God is rational, that God, rewards you rationally and punishes you rationally. So it's the belief that in life after death, in which the rewards and punishments will be distributed according to the lives that people led on earth, and that God is rational. So if you were bad on earth and did bad things, God is rational. You would be punished accordingly to those bad deeds. If you were very good and selfless and helped people and were kind, you would be rewarded for that. So God is rational, and God favors a rational morality, okay? And God is ethical. All right, now this is not a formal movement. It's not this. We don't see the Church of Deism, but we do see many philosophers and intellectuals adopt this perspective, okay? And this is contrasting with some of the organized religions, the organized religious institutions, Catholics, Protestants, within Europe. And we're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, the deists, their authority, okay, where you see, within Catholics or Protestants, the authority of the Pope versus the authority of the Bible, we're seeing that the authority for the deists is reason. That's their authority. Okay, that's what they, that's what guides them. Okay, and we had numerous philosophers who followed deism. Okay, so this is deism, very important within the Enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen. Let's continue. Now, an important issue amongst the philosophers, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be religious toleration. This will be very important for Voltaire. He's definitely a proponent of religious toleration, and we'll talk about some of the limitations of religious toleration. But this will definitely be an issue amongst the philosophers, and we're going to see philosophers not only argue for religious toleration within Christianity, so with Catholics and different groups of Protestants, but to other groups as well, to Muslims, Jews, and other religious denominations within Europe. Okay, Islam, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna have. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this later. But during this time, some writers are even gonna be presenting a more favorable outlook on Muslims in the Ottoman Empire. Now we'll see this to some extent, but this is definitely a topic that we're going to be seeing heavily focused on during the Enlightenment, this notion of religious toleration. Okay. Now, another important notion of the Enlightenment and religion is we are going to see not just a criticism on organized religion, not just new religious ideas like deism, but we're going to see the Enlightenment and the criticism of Christianity. Okay, the actual theology. And we're going to see the philosophers attack churches and the clergy, but there are also going to be philosophers attacking the Bible, attacking beliefs, attacking the morality of the Bible, attacking the morality of Christianity. Hume will argue that there's no empirical evidence, no objective evidence for the belief in divine miracles. Voltaire is going to question the truthfulness of priests and the morality of the Bible. And Voltaire will even point out some inconsistencies within the Bible and some narratives and moral acts from biblical heroes, like the story of Lot, who was considered this just and righteous. However, as Voltaire will point out, and other philosophers will point out, but he then had intercourse with his daughters. And so what's important about this, ladies and gentlemen, is this is definitely, we're seeing the influence of the Renaissance and the Reformation. We are seeing the influence of people learning how to read in the vernacular. You're seeing people look for the truth, people looking, criticizing, being critical. And this is definitely something that we are seeing within the Enlightenment, especially on religion. Voltaire, Hume, okay, calling out these notions, trying to and remember, Voltaire is a Christian. He believes in God, and he is simply trying to have a better understanding of religion. Okay, he's trying to have a better understanding of religion, and again, bridge reason to religion. Okay, and during this time, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see some atheism. All right, for those that are not familiar, atheism is the notion of where someone does not have any religious beliefs. They are predominantly secular. And so we're going to start seeing some serious religious developments during the Enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's continue. All right, now we're going to see a limitation to the toleration, ladies and gentlemen, and we know this. Okay, we definitely know that there's going to be some religious bigotry in Europe, and we've already talked a little bit about that during the Black Death, during the Inquisitions, the religious wars. We definitely talked about that. Okay, now despite the emphasis on toleration, many philosophers are going to have contempt for religion altogether, and we're still going to see some very biased and oppressive ideologies towards other religions. The attacks on the authority and writing of Christianity and some of these organized religious institutions is also going to undermine the authority and writings of Judaism. We're going to see some philosophers characterize and criticize Judaism as a more primitive faith. They're going to do the same thing to Islam. And so while, the philosophers will be promoting religious toleration, we will see some other philosophers say some very bigoted notions towards some of the more other religious minorities within Europe, and one of those is definitely going to be Islam, and I want to talk a little about Islam. Okay, during this time, okay, and we're in the Enlightenment, the 1700s, late 1600s to 1700s. Very few people practiced Islam in Europe, and that was a big change from what we saw, kind of, especially in Spain before the Reconquista. There was definitely in Spain a huge Islamic influence from North Africa. But during this time in the 1700s, a couple hundred years after that, most Europeans knew very little about the religion, and most of their knowledge of Islam came from Christian missionaries, historians, or travelers, predominantly from Christian missionaries who were very hostile to the Islamic faith, and typically any knowledge that they gave to the population of Europe about the Islamic faith was very biased and very negative. And well, that makes sense, especially from Christian missionaries, because, well, that's a rival religion. They don't want people to convert to Islam. They want people to stay, Christian, whether it's Catholic or Protestant. And so we're going to see many people in Europe, because of this information from some of these sources, consider Muslims to be religious fanatics and believe that, Islam embodied religious fanaticism. And Voltaire believed this as well. And we're going to see Europeans, criticize Islam on a cultural, on a social, on a political level. Montesquieu will believe that the influence of Islam and religion on the Ottoman Empire impeded their advancement technologically, intellectually. And so we're going to see this. And what's important to understand about this, ladies and gentlemen, for us, is that we are going to see, especially with the rise of Napoleon, and as the world starts to intermingle a little bit more with trade and the warfare that we're going to be seeing, is we're going to see Europe have more of an interaction with the Middle East. We're going to see the Middle East get involved in World War I. And so these religions and cultures are going to be interacting a lot more, and we will be seeing that throughout the rest of class. Okay, now let's talk a little about the Jewish Enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen. Like the Catholic and Protestant counterparts, we're going to see Jewish thinkers of the 18th century embrace reason and science, and the center of this Jewish Enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen, will be in Berlin. The two main writers of this movement will be Spinoza and Mendelssohn. Spinoza is from the Netherlands, and Mendelssohn is from Germany. And Spinoza, very influenced by the notion of reason and writings of Descartes, very influenced by the science of the scientific revolution, is going to be a huge proponent and champion of religious toleration. But the one who's really well known and the more kind of symbol of the Jewish Enlightenment is Mendelssohn. He was called the Jewish Socrates. He was a leading Jewish philosopher of the 1700s, ladies and gentlemen, and he argued that Jews could combine their loyalty to, Judaism with the rationality of the Enlightenment. And he advocated for the Jewish communities to, be tolerant while sustaining their traditional Jewish practices. And what he argued for was the incorporation of Jews into European society, and argued that Jews should be tolerated, but that Jews could help facilitate this toleration by, being as tolerant as they can to others as well. And so, Mendelssohn is making the case that, hey, to the Jewish community, hey, we can help facilitate, Christian tolerance towards us if we are more tolerant towards them. And really, he's really trying to facilitate good, tolerant relationships between these two religions. And that is Moses Mendelssohn of the Jewish Enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and his chief work, ladies and gentlemen, is called Jerusalem, or On Ecclesiastical Power and Judaism. Okay, the text is not super important for us on the AP exam, but Mendelssohn definitely is a key figure within the Jewish Enlightenment. Let's continue. All right, let's talk about the Enlightenment economics, ladies and gentlemen. Fascinating, super important. Let's make sure we take really good notes on this, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Many philosophers, okay, taking that reason and rationality of the scientific revolution, the notion that there are natural laws of the natural world, are going to believe that there are natural laws of economics as well. And these economic reformers, these economic intellectuals, were called physiocrats. And they were against the mercantilism and the regulation of labor by a government. Remember, if we go back to mercantilism, and in Chapter 8, my Chapter 8 lectures, which are after this, I'm going to kind of review mercantilism a little bit with the Atlantic economy. But then it's the notion, ladies and gentlemen, that mercantilism is impeding growth. Mercantilism is hindering growth, and that governments need to change from this. And this is going to be capitalism and laissez-faire. We're going to see these physiocrats argue that they believe that these policies of regulation actually hampered economic growth, and they believe that the primary role of the government was to not just protect property, but to help facilitate business, to build roads, to build canals, to get out of the way, to help facilitate business, make it easier for businesses to compete, make it easier for businesses to acquire resources, make it easier for businesses to make goods to sell to people. And what we're going to be seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is the rise of capitalism and a consumer society, the notion of buying stuff, of wanting to buy stuff, which is really interesting, which will lead to some great conversations in class, which I'm looking forward to, some great discussion. All right, ladies and gentlemen, really important. Make sure we get a highlighter out for this, okay? Adam Smith and capitalism. Adam Smith is considered the father of capitalism. And it's really important also to understand some different synonyms for capitalism, some different vocabulary that I want you all to know for capitalism. Laissez-faire economics is also referring to capitalism, free market enterprise, free market economics. Okay, laissez-faire is kind of like hands-off economics, and so those are all synonyms referring to capitalism. And so Adam Smith, he's going to be the father of capitalism, really a proponent of these ideas, and he wrote the quote unquote Bible for capitalism, which is Wealth of Nations, and this is considered the most important economic work of the Enlightenment. And he believed, ladies and gentlemen, that that economic liberty was the foundation of the natural laws governing economics. And he argued, and this is, I put it in all caps for a reason, ladies and gentlemen, is that he argued that the government regulation, that mercantilism, government control, inhibited economics and the natural laws of economics. He is making the argument that, hey, government, mercantilism, kings, ministers, get out of the economy. Let business run the economy. If you let business run the economy, there'll be more growth, there'll be more money, there'll be competition, let supply and demand run, and these natural laws and competition run the economy, facilitate the economy. And that's the main argument he's making. He's saying private business, private enterprise, okay, should run the economy, not the government, not like the public figures. Okay, and this is going to lead to some really important ideologies, and we're going to see some reactions. We're going to see eventually, because of capitalism, the rise of socialism and then the rise of communism. Okay, so this is a foundational laissez-faire economics. Capitalism comes from the Enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen. This liberalism, this liberal movement, and capitalism is considered the liberalism. This is the new economic system that's going to be very popularized during this time. Let's continue. All right, so let's talk a little bit about laissez-faire and Adam Smith's ideas. He believed in limited government interference in the economy, okay? And he believed in the natural laws of supply and demand, okay? And he believed that these natural laws of supply and demand, ladies and gentlemen, would help facilitate a fixed price or something, Okay, it would help when they kind of reach an equilibrium, it would come to a natural price for a good. And he believed that with supply and demand and competition amongst businesses, that it would help encourage businesses to produce high quality goods at a low cost. And the example that we talked about in class that we used was that we can see is that competition between businesses today in our society, right? You have the example that we talked about today was like the Apple iPhone versus the Samsung smartphones, right? And they're always competing with one another. They're always competing with one another, whether it's wireless charging, being waterproof, the size of the screen, the quality of the camera, any little change they can make to one up the other one. And we see that in their advertising all the time, right? And because their goal is to get the consumer, us, to buy their good. And it's that competition. We see that in the automobile industry, fast food industry. It's all around, ladies and gentlemen, right? Gaming industry, PlayStation versus Xbox. We see that. It's competition. And this is what Adam Smith believed. He said competition is a way to encourage businesses to produce these really high quality goods for the lowest price possible where they can make a profit. Okay, very interesting. All right, let's quickly shift our conversation a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, and talk about women in the Enlightenment. Okay, and remember, we're taking notes on women, so remember, women are a really important theme for us in this class. Okay, last time we talked about women was in the context of the scientific revolution. We're going to talk a little bit about them in the context of the Enlightenment. Now, women are going to be really important within the Enlightenment because we're going to see a movement called the Salon movement, where women are going to really help promote the careers and the popularity of the philosophers. We're going to see the Salon movement hosted by numerous women of privilege. Perhaps the best example is Madame de Geffron. And they would have these, kind of philosoph parties at their private residences called the Salon. And these women would use their social and political contacts to help popularize, connect the philosophers to people of status, to people of power, to help circulate the ideas. And these women were very well connected to political figures who could help protect the philosophers if they ever got in any trouble. That might be really handy for someone like Voltaire to give them royal pensions, but to connect them, to increase their social status, to increase the respectability of their ideas. And the philosophers liked this too because they were the center of attention. They're meeting people. They're being connected to politicians, to nobles, people of status, and the clergy. So this was pretty much organized and facilitated by women. So women really were there to help popularize a lot of these ideas from Voltaire, from Montesquieu, from Beccaria within the Enlightenment. Okay, and here's an example of a salon. So it's a large gathering of people, very fancy, tradition. Definitely part of the the nobility, upper class, where they get together, have some food, listen to some music, and hear the philosophers talk about the ideas, and they would have a conversation about them. And here's a really good example of Madame de Geffron's salon. Okay, people gathered around talking, talking about these ideas, sharing a meal, and kind of getting together to meet the philosophers. And this would really help popularize them and their ideas. All right, and here's some of the famous women who ran the salons here. And the most famous, I would argue, is Madame de Geffron. Let's continue. Now, we also had some very important female philosophers who were, intellectually engaged, and we're going to talk more about that later. But one such philosopher who made significant contributions to the Enlightenment, especially in science, was Émilie du Châtelet. She wrote extensively about math and physics and built on the works of Newton. She was very important in the continual development of calculus. And she was also a lover of Voltaire, and he learned a lot of his science, of his math, understanding the physical world from her. And he was heartbroken when she passed on. This is Émilie de Châtelet. Let's move on, okay? Now, it's really important to understand that, despite the help of women, the philosophers, the Salon movement of being promoted and popularized, on the whole, ladies and gentlemen, these philosophers weren't necessarily committed towards equality for women. They're talking about free speech. They're talking about, the general will, separation of powers. They're having conversations. about changing the government and stuff like that, but they're not necessarily talking about equality for women and changing the government to also benefit women. Some of them favored better education for women. Some criticize their education as overly religious. However, on the whole, ladies and gentlemen, we are still going to be seeing traditional views towards women, patriarchal views, men dominating institutions of family and marriage, men dominating politics, men dominating economics. These traditional views will persist, and these traditional views will be the norm. And so that's very important for us to understand, ladies and gentlemen, because women are going to be saying, hey, you're talking about all these great ideas of equality and everything, but what about equality for us? Okay, and we're not going to really see that in the Enlightenment. A really good example is we're going to talk about Rousseau, but also the Encyclopedia, which we talked about. There's not going to be many articles written by women. Many of these articles are going to uphold the sexual double standard. Many articles will characterize women as physically and mentally, and biologically inferior. And so many, we are going to see, ladies and gentlemen, on the whole, the Enlightenment is not really going to help women socially, politically, economically, towards equality. One of our best examples of this is Rousseau. And we talked about him in class a little bit, and we see his ideologies in his text MLA. And in this text, ladies and gentlemen, he argues that men and women occupy separate spheres, that men occupy pretty much every other sphere except the domestic sphere, the political, economic, social, intellectual spheres, and women are relegated to the domestic sphere. And he declared, and Rousseau believed, that women should be educated for a position of subordination of men, and that women should be taught to rear and bear children and should be taught to please men. That is their education. That should be their education. That should be their realm, the domestic sphere, the cooking, the cleaning, taking care of the house, pleasing men, learning to be subordinate to men. And this is very, very much in line with traditional viewpoints, very much mirrors what we've seen from some of our thinkers such as Castiglione. Rousseau argued that they were weaker, they were inferior on a biological, intellectual level. And this is going to influence a lot of what we're going to be seeing in the French Revolution, where we are going to see gender in some of the social, political, and economic policies, and the patriarchy and the oppression of women. And we will definitely see that, ladies and gentlemen, in the French Revolution. So when we see some of these policies and we start talking about gender in the French Revolution, we'll go back and we'll think Rousseau, and you will see it. You will kind of see Rousseau's ideas in action on that. Okay. Now we're gonna see. We will see a response to Rousseau, which is from Mary Wollstonecraft, and she's gonna kind of send a message to Rousseau. She's gonna write a text called A Vindication of the Rights of Women, and she's going to argue against Rousseau's vision. She thought that his ideas made women slaves of men, she thought his ideas, let me clarify, made women slaves to men, and that denying education to women was really, the kind of going against the entire basis of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is trying to use reason and enlighten humanity and improve humanity. Well, she's saying, well, denying education to women is really going to impede the progress of humanity, because you have an entire, population of people who are not being allowed to participate, that are not being allowed to learn reason and to reason and use rationalism. And so she's saying this is very kind of hypocritical to the whole Enlightenment movement together. And she's arguing that women should have the education that male Enlightenment thinkers were championing for men, and that if you're talking about, especially with Rousseau's talking about how do we improve society and the importance of the general will and changing society. She says, well, you can help facilitate change society by educating women. So Mary Wollstonecraft is going to really respond to Rousseau forcefully through her writings, and be really an important catalyst for the rise of feminism that we will be seeing in the 1700s, but also big time in the 1800s, when we start to see women, the movement for suffrage, the right to vote, and greater notions of equality, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we'll stop there for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining. And in the next lecture, we are going to talk about enlightened despotism and finish up chapter 9 with this lecture on enlightened despotism and some art, neoclassicism, and Rococo. Thank you so much, y'all.